Okay, it's just about 6:30, so we'd like to kick off this presentation. Thanks to everyone who's joined. My name is Will Davella. I am a development manager at Penrose. We are the county's selected partner for the redevelopment of the old jail site on Golden Hill Road in Kingston, New York. Tonight, I'm going to guide you all through the presentation to touch on the team, the project, and the community engagement events that will be taking place over the next coming months. This is a process, this community engagement process is a framework that we'd love your input on to identify as many of the key issues as possible so that we can make sure this development is a success. But first, I want to touch on some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and the link and recording of the event will be shared on the Golden Hill website after the event. And we will also post up answers to all Q&A questions that are received on the website and do our best to answer them at the end of this presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to either put it in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, or feel free to raise your hand, and when we reach the end of the presentation, we will turn you on, unmute you so you can ask your question in person. First, I want to quickly touch on the agenda for the evening. Our presentation should take approximately 40 minutes, and we'll leave 20 minutes at the end for questioning. First, the county will provide some context to the redevelopment plans, including a description of the Ulster County Housing Action Plan. Next, the development team will introduce themselves, discuss the community engagement process, design, affordability, services, and the project timeline. And for now, I'd like to turn it over to Evelyn Wright with the Ulster County.
Thanks very much, Will, and thanks everyone for being here with us tonight. Just to briefly provide some context about the county's broader housing strategy, back in the spring of 2020, just as the pandemic was really starting to unfold, the county executive and the county legislature came together and charted a course for us to address the housing crisis that we were already facing pre-pandemic, but of course has only worsened during the pandemic. And we really wanted to be able to both take a good look at what's really going on the ground and what's driving our housing affordability, as well as take quick action where we knew we had strategies that we could use to just start addressing the housing shortage. So we created a two-pronged housing strategy. We started a housing action planning process with the goals of reviewing comprehensive data on housing issues in Ulster County. We didn't want to take the time to collect any new data, but we did the best review of the publicly available data from the census and housing and urban development, along with the data the county has on home sales, and really use that to help broaden our understanding and ultimately the community's understanding of the factors that are driving our housing crisis and identify strategies that would help us increase our housing supply. And all of this really with the goal of kicking off a community-wide conversation about how we can work together to address our housing crisis. And I know many of you on the line have been participants in some of the events that we've done around this. We created a 9-member housing advisory committee that met monthly from June until December, working through all these steps in the process with us, and we released that housing action plan in February. And now we're working on putting those strategies into place, and I hope I have some more information for you about the Housing Smart Communities initiative that we're looking to launch with our municipalities later this fall. At the same time, we wanted to really move quickly to address our housing shortage by identifying county-owned property that would be suitable for housing construction. And we very quickly identified the site of the former jail on Golden Hill as kind of our #1 underutilized property. That jail has been closed for more than a decade. We have a handful of county offices up there along with some storage, but it's really a massively underutilized site. And really perfect in many ways for developing a new neighborhood up there. So we created the Ulster County Housing Development Corporation to advance this project. I sit on the board of that along with legislators Dave Donaldson and Ken Ronk, our planning director Dennis Doyle, and Hayes Clement. And together we worked through a request for proposal processes where we got several really high quality proposals for what to do with that site, and went through a really extensive process of interviewing the proposers, asking a lot of questions and asking them to make modifications to their designs, going and visiting some of their other projects in Poughkeepsie and Yonkers and Schenectady. And ultimately, we're really delighted to choose the Penrose team. We feel like they really understand the goals that we have for this project and really have the qualifications to see it through. And I'll let them tell you more about their experience and their approach to things as we move ahead. But I just want to share with you a little bit of our findings from the Housing Action Planning Study to set the context for where we are. So what we found in taking a look at the data is that over the course of the so-called recovery from the last economic crisis, over the last decade, incomes in Ulster County were really stagnant or declining for all but the highest earning households. And so we found that essentially the lower your income was in Ulster County, the more you lost over the course of that decade. And only those making the highest incomes of nearly $200,000 and higher saw an income gain over that 8-year period. Next slide, please, Will. At the same time, we saw both rents and home prices going up. And so even as renter incomes fell, median rents increased by more than 10%. And so as of 2018, to be able to afford what the Department of Housing and Urban Development calls our fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, which was $1,155. And I'll say every time I give this presentation, somebody says, boy, I wish I could find an apartment for that. So that's, already quite out of date. But in order to afford that, someone in Ulster County would need to be making $22 an hour. And our average renter wage is more like $13 an hour. So someone making an average renter wage, working in a restaurant, working in retail, many of our most common occupations, the folks who really keep our community running, would have to work more than 60 hours a week in order to afford that apartment. So it's not just unaffordable, it's massively unaffordable. Next slide, please. And so the result is that we have more than half of renters in Ulster County are in homes that are unaffordable to them, where the standard for affordability is that you should be able to spend less than 30% of your income on housing. Nearly a third of renter households are what they call severely cost burdened, meaning they are spending more than 50% of their income on housing costs. Once a household is spending that much on housing, of course, there's very tight margins for anything else. And so, the slightest unexpected medical bill or car repair or other emergency expense can really throw the household into chaos. So this is a really severe situation for our community. Next slide, please. So the recommendations from the Housing Action Plan were first and foremost to really educate and engage the community on the role that housing plays in our entire community. This is not just about feeling empathy for our individual neighbors, which of course we do, but it's really about the fabric of our community as a whole. We have businesses in the community telling us we can't hire workers because our workers can't afford to live here anymore. We have community organizations telling us, we no longer can find volunteers because the folks who used to volunteer for us are now working multiple jobs or have moved away. So this is a really serious threat to our community as a whole, as well as to individual residents. So we're going to be working to help all of our towns, cities, and villages to identify changes to their zoning and their regulations that can help increase the housing supply. Things like affordability requirements, regulations on short-term rentals, making it easier to build accessory dwelling units, and so on. We're also encouraging municipalities to look at ways that they can streamline the approval process for projects so that more projects can get built and with lower costs. And most importantly, we're encouraging communities to do what we did with Golden Hill, which is proactively identify what are our needs and where do we have sites where we can build the kinds of projects that we want, and go out and do a search for developers to build the projects that communities want, rather than being in the position of passively waiting for projects to be proposed and then having a community argument about whether we like it or not. So, those are the things we're going to continue to work on over the coming year. And this is the context for the broader context for this Golden Hill project. Thanks, Will.
Sure. Thanks, Evelyn. And to give some context of where we are today versus where we started, the RFP was released back in May of last year. We were selected as the preferred developer in November and finished negotiating terms with the county later or earlier this spring. And since then, we've really kicked off in earnest, started conversations with the city regarding approvals. And today, we're kicking off the community engagement process, which we're excited to tell you a little bit more about in the coming slides. But first, I'd like to quickly introduce the development team. Penrose is one of the largest affordable housing developers in the country. We are headquartered in Philadelphia and will act as lead developer on this project. We will circle back and provide some more information on Penrose in the coming slides. Wallace, Roberts, and Todd, who Joe and Jared are representing today, they are an architecture and planning landscape design firm based in Philadelphia, but operating nationwide, with whom Penrose has worked in collaboration with for greater than, I'd say, 20 years. And we'll talk a little bit more about their experience in the coming slides. DeMarco Constructors, a Rochester-based general contractor with a long history of successful project completions throughout the state of New York. Chazen is a premier planning and civil engineering firm based in Poughkeepsie. Stephen Winter Associates, one of the nation's leading sustainability consulting and engineering firms, is going to help us with sustainability solutions throughout the site. Renaissance Consultants, a New York-based firm focusing on facilitating local hiring and minority and woman-owned business contracting and compliance tracking. Cannon, Hammond & White, our local counsel. Penrose Management Company, our in-house property management arm. And finally, at the bottom, Family of Woodstock, our housing and supportive services partner. To touch a bit more on Penrose, Penrose is a multifamily mixed-use developer operating in, it's actually now 18 states, and we've delivered around 18,000 rental housing units throughout our portfolio. We've been operating for about 50 years, and we are a leader in mixed income and mixed use development. We work a lot with public and private partners, having completed over 100 transactions in that sort of joint venture structure, like we have here in Golden Hill. And we try to leverage complicated and complex financing structures to make deals happen, utilizing private tax credit, state and federal resources to make these affordable housing projects come to light. I sit in the New York City office. We cover the entire New York State region, and we have experience operating throughout New York State, both downstate, all the way upstate in the Capital Region and in Hudson County as well. This next slide really just provides a more visual presentation of what we discussed in the last slide. Just to quickly run through it, we've developed around 17,000 units. That's 260-ish developments throughout the country. We have about 400 employees working around the United States and 11,000 units under management. And we're recently recognized by our peers as the 5th largest affordable housing developer in the country. Wallace, Roberts, and Todd is the lead architect and master planner on the project. They are a premier design firm with a successful mixed-use and housing projects across the nation. We've worked closely with WRT on many projects, and they'll have a chance to just introduce themselves more fully in the coming, later on in the presentation. But now that I've introduced the team, I want to spend a little bit more time on the topic of today's meeting, which is the community engagement process that will be occurring over the next several months. A key part of Penrose's development process is conducting intensive community engagement to help better inform our ideas and the project's design. This is typically completed in collaboration with our public partners at the city and county level, and takes place over a number of meetings, both virtual and in person, to touch on things such as site design, desired amenities on the site, affordability levels, and other key factors that we really need to take into consideration, and anything else really identified by the community that we need to flag and talk about publicly and figure out before the development gets to further figured out. These regular meetings also keep the community appraised of progress and provide consistent updates, which will all be posted on our project website, the Golden Hill project website, which I'll provide a link to later. And to those who are signed up to our emails, we'll have all those updates sent out after the meetings, and they'll be notified of upcoming events as well. As I mentioned before, we plan to hold these meetings both virtually and in person throughout the coming months, and I'll have a schedule for that later in the presentation. Our community engagement approach is really founded upon the concept of participatory design, which encourages the community and stakeholders from across the area to participate in the design and development process with us. This is a really key part of our process to garner your input on the project plans and make sure all the key issues come to light and are discussed in detail. This process uses a variety of tools. Some of the things that you'll see at the upcoming meetings include workshops, storyboarding, polling, surveys, and a number of other tools. And these methods will result in a number of key takeaways that we will formalize both in a letter of support to the project, but also a memorandum of understanding, which outlines what we agree as a group are the key conclusions of this process that will be weaved into the project development plans. And it really holds us accountable for what comes to light in this community engagement process. Finally, I just wanted to note the Golden Hill website, which is really a key tool in this process for us. On here, you're going to find project details, somewhere to sign up for emails to receive regular project updates, notifications of upcoming meetings. And here we'll also post, again, all recordings of every event, Q&A logs for everything we received during the event and afterwards. And it's just the best way to keep abreast of our progress throughout and upcoming meetings. And before turning it over to the design team, I wanted to share a timeline of the upcoming events that you'll see in the coming months. We plan to host at least one event per month, with the preference being for in-person meetings, depending on like the current state or municipal guidelines on COVID-19. These meetings will probably be less informational than the one today and more interactive. And we'll focus on like topics such as building design, site programming, and any other key issues that come to light. These events will culminate with a reveal of the final building and site concepts that'll sync up with our application for financing towards the end of this year. And as noted below, the details on each meeting will be available on the project website and distributed to everyone on the email list. And now I want to pass it to Joe Healy with WRT to talk a little bit about the project design and initial thoughts we have. Joe?
Great. Thanks, Will. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. Just a few words about myself. I am the managing principal of WRT, and I've had the good fortune of working for most of the 20 years of the relationship with Penrose. And I'm the co-leader of the housing practice at the firm. To really sort of kick off around the project goals, I think this wonderful project is really at the intersection of opportunity and aspirations. And the foundation of the project goals is really the county housing strategy that Evelyn spoke about. So the goals were clearly articulated in the county's RFP, or request for proposal, that the design team really fully embraced as we dove into our proposal and our submission on the project itself. And the goals, as you can see on the screen here, they really span between design and housing and services. My colleague Jared, who will take the lead off from me, he's going to talk about how design in the context of this site can support the goals of multimodal transportation connections, capitalizing on the unique site characteristics, including views and access, and importantly, advancing sustainability and the Green New Deal. And our strategy and the opportunities around housing, services, and programming are really directly focused on the goals around intergenerational housing, achieving the broad affordability, supportive services, wellness, and recreation, while integrating commercial and local community programming into the project as well. Go to the next slide, Will. So our focus on sustainability and supporting the Green New Deal really starts with an integrated design approach. And what I mean by that is really in terms of our site planning, architecture, the engineering, the landscape architecture, really working holistically as a team from the very beginning of the project itself. And that project process really initiates around a careful understanding of the unique characteristics of the site and the surrounding area. And the reason for that is that we want to make the most of all of the passive strategies related to building orientation, solar exposure, prevailing winds, any of the resources that already exist on the project site itself, as well as the existing topography, tree canopy, soils, and the natural ecology, because obviously there's a great context and a heavily wooded context around the site and part of the site as well. So an important area of focus will definitely be around the overall stormwater management strategy, and we'll work very closely with the civil engineer in developing that. We're also going to pay particular attention to the insulation and the detailing of the building envelope and the right sizing of the mechanical equipment so that we can further reduce the building loads and minimize the use of fossil fuels, which is one of the explicit goals. We'll utilize low flow fixtures and energy efficient LED lighting. We'll consider locally sourced materials with high recycled content and a low carbon footprint as well. And all of this will really be in consideration of durability and practical maintenance, which is really something that we share very deeply in terms of how we approach that with Penrose over many, many years. So I think I'll stop there and now hand off to my colleague Jared, who is in the lead project design role for the project.
Thanks so much, Joe, and good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. As Joe mentioned, my name is Jared McKnight, and I'm a designer and associate with WRT, and I'm going to be sharing some of our work to date, really leading up to these engagement sessions. And so much of this project has really revolved around important access to open space in this really beautiful context. And with an overall goal of developing an intergenerational open space that embraces a diverse set of programs for all ages and provides access to social, cultural, health, and environmental benefits for the residential community and its neighbors, the open space goals were really organized around three main concepts: connectivity, health and wellness, and creating an identity for Golden Hill, including providing connectivity to important adjacencies like the Empire State Trail. Next slide, Will. When we start to think about sort of the future users of this site, the design is very much inspired by creating a place for all. It's really centered around two primary green spaces that are connected throughout the center of the site: the community green and the central green. And the site strategically organizes the pedestrian, vehicular, bus, and bike circulation to really maximize access to and safety while within these central green spaces. And these spaces provide flexible lawn spaces, unique play opportunities for all ages to engage in wellness, as well as spaces to gather, relax, and enjoy the outdoors. With these ideas in mind, the design is very much the result of a holistic approach to circulation, open space, building scale and placement, and programs that will be coupled with an approach to the landscape as a really sustainable system that meets those sustainability and design goals that Joe just mentioned previously. Really looking at native plant palettes, stormwater integration, and seasonality that starts to enhance the beauty of the natural surroundings on this particular site. On the next slide. When we start looking at the site plan, it's really focused on a flexible design framework that organizes the parking at the perimeter of the site. That sort of move there really sets up a system of both primary and secondary pedestrian circulation and connectivity across the site, really organizing that vehicular network toward the outside to maximize the safety and sort of opportunities to access those central green spaces directly from the residential units. The open space system and the building placement are really uniquely shaped to capture views both sort of internally across the site as well as externally, really creating a hierarchy of outdoor spaces and experiences that are accessible from each of those residential units. On the screen, you can see the proposed 160 unit plan, which includes a flexible building typology of 2 to 4 story buildings across the repurposed portion of the site, with a community hub that's situated at the entrance to the site next to a mid-rise senior-oriented building. So if we start at the top center, you can see the community hub, envisioned as a 1-story, 5,000 square foot community building, right next to the mid-rise senior-oriented building to the left, a 4-story, 80,000 square foot building with 80 units of 1 to 2 bedrooms. And then lastly, to sort of the center and the bottom right of the image you see on the screen, you see a series of 2 to 3 story townhouse buildings with an additional 80 units that add up to that total of 160. The context for the buildings really provides opportunity for maximizing the use of renewable energy through the potential of on-site solar arrays on the roofs and green building practices in the design of each of the buildings on the site, as well as sort of the materiality of those buildings and the landscape as sort of this centralized system connecting all of the residential units. Next slide, Will. So when we were thinking about the site's unique assets, its resiliency and sustainability, and really trying to employ a really contextual approach, our team focused our precedent research on exploring vernaculars that are distinct to the Hudson Valley, trying to gain inspiration from the character, materiality, building forms, and opportunities that exist within the project's parameters to further enhance that holistic approach to both the buildings as well as the landscapes. And this process really focused on delivering a sense of place for the site and this residential community by strategically incorporating iconic building forms, contextual palettes of materials, and facilitating an important integration between the buildings and their surrounding context in the landscape. Next slide. And bringing that contextual design to the site, our focus in these conceptual design visualizations begins to build on those ideas, really looking at one option for designing an identity for the site that benefits from that materiality and that integration between the buildings and the landscape to form a complementary character that's unique to the Hudson Valley and unique to this site as Golden Hill that will result in placemaking at the entire site scale. This would be reflected in the use of materials and colors and design details where the intergenerational housing is connected and integrated with its surrounding context, maximizing those natural, social, and recreational assets of the site and its surroundings to really further enhance the character of the place with an opportunity to create a neighborhood that encloses and protects that central green space while also framing views and really important entrances to buildings through the massing and materiality throughout the site and its programs. And now I think I'm going to pass it back off to Will to talk a little bit about housing and services.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jared. In addition to the feedback on the building and site design that Jared and Joe just touched on, we will also be looking for community input on the appropriate affordability and population mix of the project. On the screen, you can see a couple example rents to demonstrate the potential affordability levels that could be provided on the site with a comparison to approximate market rents in the area. In future meetings, we can examine together how these rents are calculated, what affordability levels might be appropriate for the site, and other related topics like how to apply to live here and other housing related issues. In addition to rents and affordability, we would also really and greatly appreciate community input on the best way to program the project with the right services and activities to ensure we construct a vibrant community that is both well connected to the services that is going to make it resilient. So in summary, we really view this community engagement process to generally fall into two buckets. The design services that Joe and Jared mentioned, and then the housing and services bucket on the right that I walked through quickly on the previous slides. With the design related commentary focused on building materials, sustainability features that make the most sense, site design, and other tangible factors, while the discussion on rents and services and ideal populations and other programming issues falling into the other bucket of housing and services. One thing we really like to stress here is that we're looking for the community to point us in the right direction and help us add additional items to each one of these lists, on the site, on the building side, whether there's more questions about housing or things we haven't considered for services, so we can make sure to address them in the months ahead and end up with a successful project that's best informed by the people who are most attuned to what this project needs. And lastly, we wanted to provide a brief overview of the project timeline in the next few months and how it relates to the community engagement process that we've been walking through tonight. And as you can see, our plan here really is to overlay and develop the building plans and financing strategy as we receive input and feedback from each one of these building meetings, which are the blue dots on the top there. And as we get further along and the plans can be further developed, we'll work and start applying for municipal approvals and working towards a financing application and award at the end of the year. And that's all we have for you tonight. I'm going to put up, I just want to point out at the bottom here, again, we have a link to our project website, penrose.com/apartments/New York/Golden Hill. I think you can probably just Google Penrose Golden Hill and that'll pop up. Or feel free to email us at any time with any questions that come up at goldenhill@penrose.com. And I'll just leave this up here as we turn to Q&A. We plan to hold our next meeting fully in person in late August, and we'll be sending around the location of that event in the coming weeks. And at this point, I am going to open it up to any questions we've received. So first, I will start with the questions we've received in the Q&A. And if the individuals who asked the questions are still on the line, I can unmute them to ask their questions if that would be appreciated. So Matthew Colangelo, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you first. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. The questions are in the Q&A, so you can read them if you'd like, and if you could.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm happy to prompt the question and do my best to provide an answer. So question number one is, how is construction debris going to be removed from the site? Should we expect Glen and Mary Street to experience double the current traffic volume while the project is being built for 2+ years? If so, will we be compensated or eligible for a reduction in property tax assessment? Thanks, Matt, for bringing this to our attention. We are just now getting preliminary pricing and input on the demolition of the facility and the site. Right now, we do not have a debris removal plan in place, but preliminary input is that we're hoping to be able to keep most of the debris on site and not have to experience a lot of trucking off site and avoid that negative implications in the neighborhood.
Excuse me, you're going to keep the debris on site? You're going to bury it? I mean, how are you going to get it off site?
We can, that's something we're going to have to continue to develop in the coming months, but we can potentially use some of the dirt we dig up to regrade the property.
Well, there's a 3-story building there.
Yes, understood.
Aren't you gonna knock it down?
Yes, we are going to knock down the building.
Mr. Colangelo, Will, if I could just jump in.
Go ahead, Evelyn.
Just to cut right to the chase of your question, for sure, there will not be construction debris leaving the site through the residential neighborhoods. I can assure you that whatever hauling gets done will not be going down Glen Street. So let's put that to rest right now. Will, I wonder, because many of these questions have to do with the environmental review process, if you'd like to put up the next to last slide and just talk a little bit about where that fits in the timeline and the kinds of questions that will be addressed in that process. So in the
Sure,
previous slide with the timeline, in parallel with the community engagement process and the design process, we'll be working with the City of Kingston through a series of environmental reviews and municipal approvals, culminating in the rezoning of the site. And so, questions about traffic, about neighborhood impacts, those are all going to be taken up through that environmental review process.
All right. Well, I only asked one question about traffic, so I would hope that we can address the questions the remaining questions that I asked.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to provide that kind of timeline context for everybody because we kind of glossed over that aspect of this slide.
Yeah, and I just want to mention as a part of the environmental review, there will be an erosion and sediment control plan that we'll have to provide, which is going to take all that into account.
Oh, thank you so much.
On to the second question, who will be eligible to live in these newly constructed units? Again, this is something we hope to dig a little bit more deeply into when it comes to populations and affordability levels in the coming in-person meetings. But so the answer to that is it's still being determined. Number 3, how and when will the rezoning occur? Seems like the cart is being put before the horse here. Why are we talking about development project being built on land that isn't rezoned properly? Should we assume the zoning is a done deal? The rezoning process has not commenced. It will commence when we submit to the City of Kingston our rezoning application and for site plan approval. We have not done that yet, but we plan to start soon. And we cannot say that the rezoning is assured in any way.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the environmental review process has to go on before the rezoning is completed. That's part of the approval process. So that's why the rezoning comes at the end of the process. That's the regulatory requirement, is that we go through all of those studies around environment, erosion, traffic impacts, and the city makes its decision about the rezoning once that is all completed. So that has to happen last in that process.
The only reason why I was asking, because back in October, there was a rezoning resolution that was put forth that was pulled, I think, the day of. So there was just some confusion. That was why I was asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, if I know the city is going through some reviews of its zoning more generally, and if the city wants to make a zoning change to multiple sites simultaneously around its strategies for land use, that's a separate process. But to rezone a single site for a given project, you have to go through the entire environmental review process, because we don't want projects going ahead without that process being done. So yeah, I know those two things came up at the same time, and it was a little confusing.
Yeah, and might I add that the design that we currently showed tonight, is very schematic, and it's going to be further informed by what we find out in the meetings in the months ahead. And we really can't proceed with the rezoning application until we have a more substantial design. So we're going to wait for the community input, then further the design, and then work on submitting for the rezoning application. So it's one after another. Absolutely. Next question is, will a pilot tax break be required? And so what are the terms? Will the pilot request come at the end of the planning process rather than the beginning? So rather than at the beginning, in order to use as a contingency for the project to occur. I can tell you that the pilot is still a to be determined amount. We're just too early on in the project design to understand the full costs. to understand whether or not this resource will be required, and it's still to be determined. But we can learn more about that as the plans develop in the months ahead.
If I may, Will, and sorry I keep
Go ahead,
jumping
Evelyn.
in, but
Please.
it's really important to understand that pilots for affordable housing projects are really different from pilots for other types of development. So a pilot for an affordable housing project is not only and primarily about a tax break for the project. Affordable housing project tax assessments are based on the rents, the income that the project gets. It's not like a home where there's a fixed property valuation. It's based on the project's income. And every year that can change based on, because the rents are income controlled based on the individuals living there, the project's rents and hence its tax assessment and its tax bill can change every single year. And so what a pilot for an affordable housing project does is create a schedule for future tax payments so that the developer and the financiers that they're trying to get to support the project and make it possible have that certainty about what the future expenses are going to be. So you structure that that payment in lieu of taxes according to the anticipated rents based on the mix of income levels of people that you expect to be living in the project. And that creates that certainty about the future tax bill that makes it easier to finance the project. So I know that pilots have been a really controversial issue in the community and something that we're really committed to creating more transparency around ourselves. But I really want folks to understand that creating that kind of certainty of future tax payments is really important for a project like this to get it financed and off the ground.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for answering that. I just hope that the pilot process will start as early as possible rather than as late as possible. And I think that would help to provide a lot of clarity, in particular with the school district, given the fact that this housing project, which I think is great, will probably result in an influx of students. So I hope that the school board, along with all taxing jurisdictions, will have the opportunity to present or to be presented with any pilot request as early as possible in this process. Because I would hope that as the developers talk about the financial numbers, I would hope that they would have that information as soon as possible, and then that discussion could start rather than at the last minute.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Continue onwards. Number 5 and number 6 that I received are similar. I'll read the first one, answer, and then read the second one as well. Number 5, how would the challenges regarding ingress and egress be handled? There have been numerous complaints by homeowners and residents along the Glen Street dating back to the 1970s, as the roadway infrastructure leading to and from the Golden Hill complex is not adequate to support current volume of traffic. I guess what I can say is that a traffic analysis will be required as part of the environmental process that we owe to the state. And we will research that and ultimately determine if any additional traffic infrastructure, signaling, or signage is required because of the project during that process, and will be required to incorporate that into our project plan, so that that's all covered in the environmental process that we'll be working on with the state.
Thank you so much.
And I will read the 6th one, which is very similar, touches on the same things. How will the dangerous ingress and egress challenges along Route 32 and Golden Hill Drive be handled? The New York State Department of Transportation has acknowledged the roadway already exceeds design capacity, and there are sightline issues when exiting left onto Route 32 from Golden Hill Drive. Will a traffic light be installed? If so, who will be paying for that cost? And yep, again, this will be covered in the traffic analysis that we will be required to present as part of the state seeker process. Next question. If all goes according to plan, when would you break ground and hope to have the project finished? If all goes according to plan, we will break ground approximately a year from today with construction financing, and construction should take about 18 months if we can complete this in one phase. with approximately 9 to 10 month lease-up process. Will we have access to the PowerPoint? Absolutely. A recording of this meeting, Q&A responses will be uploaded to the project website along with this PowerPoint. The next question I received is, what is the metric for affordability that's being used to determine rent rates? Again, this is something that we can talk about in detail in the coming meetings about rents and affordability. The rents that we showed up there are not the rents that we currently have set for the project. It's just an idea of what we can provide, and we hope to better inform that in the coming meetings and based on the input. And we'll talk about how those rents are calculated and what might be most appropriate for this site. And the last question I received here is about why the chat is this, if the questions can be put into the chat, which is disabled. And it's just any questions, we feel it's best to have the questions come through the Q&A. So if there's anything further, please, we'll keep our eyes out. If anyone has, that is the end of the written questions, but feel free to raise your hands at the bottom there if you have another question you want to bring up and ask out loud. Okay, that is all the questions we've received. I really appreciate everyone who attended this evening's presentation. We look forward to scheduling our next event in person up on site or at a nearby facility. And we'll be announcing that date and the location as soon as possible and transmitting that to everyone who's signed up on the Golden Hill Project website and put their email. And we'll be also be passing around the community to the best of our ability. So please reach out to us with any questions at goldenhill@penrose.com. And I wanted to thank everyone again for attending this informational webinar.
Thanks, Will, and thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And I just wanted to say, everyone is also welcome to give me a call at the County Executive's office with any questions that you have about the project. I'm happy to answer questions about the process and what things are going to look like going forward. Thanks a lot for coming tonight, and we're looking forward to in-person meetings next month.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.